Tonight, the urgent message from Canada's medical community over Ottawa's proposed capital gains tax changes. Warnings the new rules will exacerbate a critical doctor shortage.
Maybe it's time to close up the doors.
The potential impact, the plea, and the response.
Chinese foreign interference in Libya by way of Canada.
Also, the Mounties accused 2 UN agency workers of orchestrating an international arms conspiracy from Quebec. Plus, the spread of campus unrest.
We have reached such a point where we can't talk to each other.
Crackdowns and violent clashes as pro-Palestinian protests grow at universities in the U.S.
I'm not allowed to talk, but people are allowed to talk about me.
Revelations of a tabloid publisher at Donald Trump's criminal trial. What he said about the lengths he went to suppress negative news about the former president. Plus, a good run.
My dream is to run across Canada.
75 kilometers a day, 99 days, and one powerful mission.
Look at the speed! Look at the speed!
CTV National News with Umar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. A clash between Canadian doctors and the federal government had Ottawa playing defense today after a major warning from the Canadian Medical Association. It says capital gains tax changes introduced in the 2024 federal budget will have adverse effects on physician recruitment and retention at a time when 6.5 million Canadians don't have access to a family doctor. A recent ranking put Canada last when compared to the number of adults in other developed countries who had access to a primary health care provider. CTV's Mike Couture leads us off with the financial plea and the response.
Family doctors is really kind of the smallest of the small businesses out there.
Dr. Ali Khan Abdullah has practiced family medicine for 30 years. He incorporated the business to help it run smoothly and to help save for his own retirement. But he says changes to the capital gains inclusion rate in last week's budget change the calculation.
Now there's even more incentive for people to say, okay, well, maybe it's time to close up the doors because the cost of running a business is more so than the benefit of being able to save for retirement.
If the budget passes, the capital gains inclusion rate would increase from half to 2/3 of personal profits over $250,000. It also applies to all gains earned by trusts and corporations, even medical practices.
Changing the taxation rate and inclusion rate inside those capital gains is akin to an 8% retrograde taxation on those investments for our retirement.
Dr. Ross points out incorporating was allowed more than a decade ago in lieu of increased fees. Some compare it to a defined pension plan that physicians set up for themselves. But the Prime Minister says it's all about fairness.
We just don't think it's right that a student or an electrician or a teacher be paying taxes on 100% of their income, while others have the opportunities to use accountants and pay taxes on only 50% of that income.
Still, some physicians say there should be exceptions.
You must make a carve-out for people in professions, in businesses that actually serve the population of Canada, and you need to give them a special arrangement.
The CMA wants to meet with the government to discuss a carve-out. The association worries if there isn't one, it could affect Canada's ability to recruit and retain doctors. Omar?
All right, Mike, thanks. The Mounties revealed today they've busted a secret plot by 2 men in Quebec working at a United Nations agency to sell Chinese drones and military equipment to Libya illegally. CTV's Montreal Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin on the suspects who RCMP allege stood to gain millions from the deal.
Montreal served as the staging ground for an international conspiracy, according to the RCMP. The plot that reads like a James Bond movie called for Chinese military drones capable of carrying out missile attacks to be sold to Libya, and Libyan crude oil shipped to China. The RCMP suggests that if the deal had materialized, it would have benefited the forces of Khalifa Haftar, then a renegade general vying for control of Libya.
What we're talking about here is Chinese foreign interference in Libya by way of Canada.
2 employees of the Montreal-based International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, a specialized agency of the UN, are now accused of trying to broker the deal.
They met while employed at ICAO. Part of the conspiracy also took place while they were at ICAO.
While the RCMP says ICAO is a victim in this, experts suggest the suspects linked to the organization should come as no surprise.
It has long been exploited by intelligence operatives, in particular from China and from Russia, for that purpose, because if you're not going to put them in an embassy, the next best place to put them around the world is inside international organizations.
One of those suspects, Fatih Benhamed Mawek, was arrested in the Montreal area. He appeared in court via video conference on charges related to the plot of shipping Libyan oil to China.
And Libya is sanctioned by the United Nations, and there's an act in Canada, a law of Parliament of Canada, that prohibits that.
Another suspect, Maoud Mohamed El Saway Sayeh, is still wanted and now the subject of an Interpol red notice.
Had this deal gone through, they would have benefited from potentially millions of dollars of commission per month.
ICAO says it's cooperating fully with the investigation and that it condemns any actions that are not consistent with the organization's values. Omar.
All right, Jen, thanks. $1 million in reward money is being offered for tips on capturing Canada's 25 most wanted.
Today, we show you the money.
Today, Toronto police unveil the names and financial incentives for information to help hunt down the fugitives. Top of the list is Michael Baby, wanted for his alleged role in the murder of Toronto's Shamar Powell Flowers 9 months ago. Financial justice today for the victims of disgraced U.S. gymnastics team doctor Larry Nassar. The Justice Department has reached a nearly $139 million settlement with 139 athletes, as well as others who were abused. The DOJ also apologized for the FBI's failure to properly investigate the claims and protect the victims. Nassar is serving up to 175 years in prison for sexual assault. There are escalating tensions on the campuses of several prominent universities in the United States tonight. CTV's Heather Wright on the growing demonstrations and the crackdown.
You have been warned by New York University to leave the area.
More arrests made overnight as police in riot gear removed protesters from New York University. More than 100 people were arrested, the latest crackdown on pro-Palestinian protests taking place on U.S. college campuses. This latest wave, a direct response to Columbia University's decision last week to call in police to arrest students who refuse to leave encampments, many demanding the school divest from businesses with ties to Israel, while also condemning the war, which has killed more than 30,000 Palestinians, according to the Gaza Health Ministry.
There was no good reason, and there never is a good reason to mass arrest their students and faculty.
45 students were arrested at Yale yesterday after they too refused to leave encampments.
Here we were just exercising our freedom of speech.
The war in Gaza tearing apart college campuses, while the demonstrations test university policy. Administrators trying to balance free speech and student safety, with many Jewish students feeling threatened, saying the language at protests can be anti-Semitic.
It's just hard to see that we have reached such a point where we can't talk to each other.
In Ottawa, hate speech is being investigated by police after a number of complaints were made following a protest in front of Parliament Hill over the weekend.
October 7th is proof that we are almost free. Long live October 7th.
This video has not been independently verified by CTV News, but shows a person on a megaphone praising the attacks of October 7th.
I think that there are many individuals who are attending these rallies and supporting these protests out of the best intentions, and they don't realize that they are marching next to people who are calling for the deaths of Jews.
For safety reasons, Columbia is giving students the option to attend their last week of classes remotely. Schools now looking ahead to graduation, where many will set up designated areas for demonstrations. Omar.
All right, Heather Wright in Toronto tonight. The jury in Donald Trump's criminal trial was exposed to the inner workings of the business of salacious tabloid gossip today by the former publisher of the National Enquirer, who returned to the witness stand. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joey Malbin on his testimony.
Donald Trump sat stone-faced across from his longtime friend, David Pecker, a former tabloid publisher. Pecker, who was granted immunity, testified that when Trump announced his presidential run, he, Trump, and his lawyer, Michael Cohen, hatched a scheme at Trump Tower in 2015 to catch and kill damaging stories about Trump and publish hit jobs on Trump's rivals like Hillary Clinton and Ted Cruz. I told him we're going to try to help the campaign, Pecker said, and to do that, I want to keep this as quiet as possible. Pecker agreed to be the eyes and ears of the campaign, notifying Cohen in coordination with Trump. When a doorman claimed there was a Trump love child, Pecker bought and buried the story.
Come on over. Wow.
When Playboy model Karen McDougal shopped her story about a Trump romance, it was bought and buried. And just weeks before the election, porn star Stormy Daniels threatened to go public about an alleged affair with Trump. The prosecution says Cohen wired Daniels $130,000 and hid the payment before voters went to the polls.
I think everybody has made their own assessment of President Trump's character, and so far as I know, you don't pay someone $130,000 not to have sex with you.
Trump left court angry. Prosecutors want to hold him in contempt or fine him for attacking witnesses, even the jury, violating his gag order.
We have a gag order, which to me is totally unconstitutional. I'm not allowed to talk, but people are allowed to talk about me. So they can talk about me, they can say whatever they want, they can lie.
Not a good day for the former president. The catch and kill operation is central to the case against him, what the prosecution calls a criminal conspiracy to corrupt the 2016 presidential election. Trump has pleaded not guilty. Omar?
All right, Joy, thank you. The man who was acquitted in the death of a Toronto police officer is sharing the emotional and financial burden he has experienced after nearly 3 years of waiting to clear his name. He spoke to CTV's John Woodward on the same day Toronto's top cop clarified his comments on the case.
That night was a nightmare for us.
A nightmare finally over. The relief written on the faces of Umar Zamir and his wife Ida Sheikh. The threat of life in prison no longer hanging over his head.
We are so blessed. But we hoped for this day. But we were scared that it would never come.
The last 3 years have taken a toll. Police charged him with first-degree murder. He was branded a cop killer, with top political figures, including Ontario's premier, expressing outrage he had been released on bail. After 3 months in custody, he missed the birth of his second child.
It happened. It's a very sad, tragic accident. I just wish it didn't happen.
But the evidence at trial was a very different story. Zamir was downtown for Canada Day with his pregnant wife and young son. He testified plainclothes officers didn't identify themselves as police, and in a panic he fled, not realizing he had struck and killed Officer Jeffrey Northrup. Video evidence would contradict the testimony of several officers. The trial judge, Anne Malloy, apologized to Zamir for all he had been through. Toronto's police chief announcing 2 reviews, one by the OPP of officer testimony and another of plainclothes procedures, and walking back his comments that he hoped for a different outcome.
Is that I accept the jury's findings, and we are an organization that's grieving and trying to work through finding some path towards closure.
Ontario's premier offered an excuse for his earlier comments, saying, "At the time I had limited information. The courts have decided, the jury decided, and you have to respect the justice system." Zamir has said it's premature to think of a lawsuit against the police or the Crown, saying he prefers to spend his first days as a free man with his kids. But questions remain about how this prosecution went as far as it did.
It got this far, and it was a few inches away, perhaps, from a wrongful conviction.
Zamir says he will never stop being racked with guilt over the death of Officer Northrup.
I don't know how long it will haunt us.
But his family is getting some relief from the financial toll. Online donations have totaled $230,000. John Woodward, CTV News, Toronto.
British Columbia is putting plans for legal action against social media companies on hold. The province has reached a deal to work on better protections for young people. But as CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson reports, critics are questioning the timing.
After the online sextortion of Carson Cleland, a 12-year-old boy from Prince George who died by suicide last year, BC got serious about taking on social media.
The message to these big, faceless companies is, you will be held accountable in British Columbia for the harm that you caused to people.
Today, an about-face. Instead of threatening legal action against Meta, Snapchat, and TikTok, the province has agreed to work with them.
We were contacted by Meta, and we entered into discussions. And I think it's fair to say that I was very skeptical.
The goal of the online harm bill was to take the companies to court to recover costs for societal harm, similar to battles against big tobacco. Now that bill is on hold in favor of face-to-face talks EB says he now believes can lead to meaningful change.
To the best of our knowledge, we're the only jurisdiction in North America and perhaps in the world that has captured the attention of social media companies in this way and has a prospect of reaching a cooperative agreement to protect kids.
The change in course comes after the province had been facing pressure from the business community, who feared the bill could allow the government to go after anyone marketing a product or service that could be considered harmful. EB denies the pushback played a role. Critics think otherwise.
I think the strength of the business community played a significant role in this particular move.
Experts in online safety believe the pivot could pay off.
Overall, I think this is a better approach because we can get things changed more quickly than through the courts.
Multiple school boards in Ontario are going that route, as well as dozens of U.S. states. And BC is leaving the door open to legal action if sit-down talks go sideways. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Vancouver.
Coming up, the push to end plastic pollution.
The world is counting on us to deliver a new treaty.
Calls for Canada to take the lead in a global issue. Plus, a Canadian runner's inspiring journey across the country. Ottawa is hosting a UN summit to curb plastic pollution, but Canada's global push is being overshadowed by a domestic fight over the carbon tax. CTV's Judy Trin explains.
More than 4,000 delegates from 176 countries watching Canada on the global stage.
We need to forge a new global consensus.
Canada is one of 60 nations that want to end plastic pollution by 2040. As host of this summit, environmentalists called on Stephen Guilbeault to lead the international push for strong targets to cut plastic production.
I would love to see the UN come together on a production cap. Whether that is a hard line or whether that is forcing countries through legal requirements to implement a suite of regulations that limit plastic production.
But today it was a domestic climate issue making the headlines.
We're going to continue to deliver the Canada Carbon Rebate to families right across Saskatchewan, despite the fact that Premier Moe is not sending that money to Ottawa right now.
Saskatchewan stopped collecting carbon taxes on natural gas in February. The Prime Minister's announcement is a reversal of his government's past no remittance, no rebate position. It came as Guilbeault was providing an update on the day's international treaty negotiations. Why has your government changed its position on this?
I'm sorry, I've been here negotiating, so I haven't seen this news, but we'll be happy to get back to you.
The federal government says it will rely on the Canada Revenue Agency to get the money it's owed from Saskatchewan. But Axe the Tax rallies have drawn big crowds. 7 of 10 provincial premiers have voiced opposition to carbon pricing. But Guilbeault says he's confident Canadians still support measures to fight climate change.
There are some Conservative premiers and the Conservative Party of Canada who've decided to play politics with environmental issues, but I think that by and large that's not where Canadians are.
The carbon tax shows that even agreements passed into law can be watered down with enough pressure. It's a lesson for negotiators at the UN summit as they work towards drafting a binding treaty on reducing plastic waste. Omar.
Judy, thank you. Still ahead, the rare chance to own a piece of musical history. The stone lions in Vancouver Stanley Park are showing their true playoff colors.
I like it because they're very solemn, and they've been around all the time, and now they're participating. I think it's charming.
The statues at the entrance to the Lionsgate Bridge have been mysteriously outfitted with Canucks jerseys as they take on Nashville. No one knows exactly who's behind the hockey sweaters, but fans are hoping it brings some good luck. Well, luck and a lot of money are what it will take to own a piece of Beatles history.
Please help me, help me, help me.
A 12-string guitar that belonged to John Lennon is up for auction next month. It was discovered by the new owners of a house during a move in Britain. Lennon played it on the Beatles' 1965 album, Help. It's expected to fetch nearly $1 million. After the break, from coast to coast for a cause. A long-distance runner from Nova Scotia is really proving that every journey begins with a step. Except in Ryan Keeping's case, he's taking thousands of them. He's on a mission to run 75 kilometers a day, the equivalent of almost 2 marathons, for 99 days, from St. John's, Newfoundland to Victoria, BC. And as CTV's Sarah Plowman reports, on day 23, even though that is his end point, it's not his final destination.
Welcome to his office. The shoulder of the Trans-Canada is where Ryan Keeping has tasked himself to run. And run and run. Nearly 2 marathons a day for 99 days. From St. John's to Victoria, he's inspired by his hero, Terry Fox.
A lot of people have adversity in life, right? There's a lot of things that can go wrong. And he's a good example of he went wrong. He had cancer, his leg got removed, but he still went out and chased down his passion.
Keeping's cause is the Heart and Stroke Foundation.
At $50,000 raised. I can't thank you guys enough for the support.
Heart conditions affect his family like his dad and grandfathers.
I'm the young fella, Ed. I'm Ryan's grandfather.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm the other grandfather.
Who are along for the ride and today are co-captains in the support van.
I wish I was his age and be able to join him.
As Keeping climbs grueling hills, it may seem like few people are following, but online, tens of thousands are. Drawing runners out to join him.
The moment I realized how big it was when I got to Halifax and there was like 400 people at the meetup. Like Point Pleasant Park was just a sea of red hats running. It was insane.
Strangers stop for handshakes and selfies. Others offer a place to rest or food. Fuel for someone who's offered them inspiration.
I might go for a little run in a little bit.
Keeping expected his run to go well, but didn't expect this much attention this fast.
It almost felt like Canada kind of needed something to cheer for. People are watching, they're saying, hey, I can't wait till you get to Toronto, or you get to Calgary, or you get to different parts of the country, right? So that's really cool.
One man on his mission to honor his hero, Terry Fox, and remind Canadians what's possible. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, near Florenceville, Bristol, New Brunswick.
We're cheering him on to an incredibly powerful message and just 76 days to go. That's a snapshot of this Tuesday for all of us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching. Good night and see you tomorrow.